Alrighty tidy folks, today's video is going to be a little slight deviation from the standard, so I'll probably release it on a different day just so that all you car enthusiasts can keep your Saturdays, which is what I'm going with now, and don't worry about it, shut up. Today's video is the repair of a Triplett 630 volt ohm meter that I found at Elliott Electronic Supply there in Tucson, Arizona on Tyndall Avenue, I believe. It's off of Park and 22nd. Great place. They've got this kind of enormous warehouse full of just old stuff, and it's very neat. And every time I go in there, they almost always have a voltometer of some kind, and anytime I go in there and they have a voltometer of some kind, I poorly manage money and I buy one. They're $40, it's not a big deal. This one I got with a leather case, no leads, non-functional, and you can see there the circuit protection board appears to be, well, honestly, fried. One of the legs on the one of the transistors was actually blown off the transistor, which is quite hilarious to me. You can see that big old burn mark where it just decided to go bzzzt, and then it was no more. A side effect of this was also a capacitor that blew physically somewhere else in the meter, but it's electrically related. So you had that capacitor there, it kind of blew out the side. What ended up happening was the meter appeared to have been dropped. There's a bunch of cracks on the back of the case, which is phenolic bakelite, and the circuit protection board is mounted by one screw. It apparently was not tight enough, or this thing was dropped from a pretty substantial height. The board twisted under the screw. One of the contacts came into contact, conductive contact, mind you, with the steel frame of the circuit protection relay, which is directly to battery ground. So what ended up happening was the 30 volt battery shorted directly through the circuit protection relay and blew one of the legs off of one of the transistors in the diff amp for the circuit protection relay. Parts were easy enough to find. The part numbers were legible enough under the conformal coat. I could never get clear enough images in Arizona of these parts, so you'll have to take my word for it that I found same or similar enough parts for replacement that the circuit will now function as intended. One of them I actually couldn't even find a data sheet on. I had to call my suppliers and ask them if they could find something, and somebody found a reference to a thing that was a superseded number that was then some specs for that part, and that part was then superseded by another part, and the specs for that part we had to verify were the same, and they were close enough for the purposes of this device that it really didn't matter. I will stick up on the screen the schematic that Triplett themselves was so very kind to provide to me. I sent them an email, and within 2 days I had the full book, the owner's manual for this particular unit, the Type 6, and I will stick the schematic up in there so that you guys can take a look at that and see the circuit protection circuitry and what I had to work with, because whenever these types of units, a lot of times what you do is you send them to your cal shop or you send them to a repair shop, and they have the parts, or they have the contacts, or they have the distributors for parts to affect repairs. The circuit protection board does not actually have a circuit diagram in the owner's manual. which means if we needed to repair it, we'd have to contact Triplett themselves and hope that they would still have repair documentation for it. I did contact them. They did not have repair documentation for the circuit protection board. They did not have parts remaining for the circuit protection board, and they suggested I call a local repair shop that they had in their database that they gave me the number of. That repair shop also did not have repair documentation or parts or suppliers for parts or any information on the circuit protection system for the meter. They told me that their process would be the same thing that I was doing, try to get part numbers off of it. If I couldn't, try to reverse engineer the circuit and figure out what exactly it was supposed to be doing. At the end of the day, it's a diff amp that verifies one part of the circuit against battery voltage, and at some point designated by a voltage divider contained on the board, it enables the relay, which opens a contact to disconnect the leads from the internal circuitry. It's actually a really simple circuit. Once I started scraping the conformal coat off of the burnt parts, the part numbers were still intact. It was the conformal coat had gotten hot and discolored and just made it so that you couldn't read the part numbers underneath it. Easy enough if you have even the little tiniest idea of what you need to do to get down there. Once you're inside, you can figure it out pretty easily. I did have on the laptop, my recording laptop, the schematic pulled up. You can kind of see the corner of the monitor down there in the bottom left of the frame. I had the schematic pulled up while I was doing this. Not that it really did a whole lot of good for me, because at the end of the day, there was no schematic for the circuit protection board, which means I had no idea where the wires went. I had no idea what the orientation of the parts was. I had to kind of look at how the circuit was arranged and figure out which way everything needed to go in the first place. Being that this is kind of what I do for a living, it wasn't all that hard. I'm not going to bore you guys with the gory details. If you want some videos disassembling circuits and describing what they do, we can do that in the future, later. Maybe I need to start a second channel for that. I have no idea. I really have no idea. But once I got everything put back on the board, I then had to solder it back into the circuit. And let me ask you guys a question. Let me know in the comments what you think. When you take a photograph with a smartphone, and then you don't interact with said photograph for any reason, it just sits there on the storage device, whether it's internal or an SD card or whatever, should the image, should that file disappear mysteriously? Let me know in the comments. I don't think it should. I think the images should remain. I took images with the phone that you see right there at the bottom center of the frame, Samsung S20 FE. I know for a fact I took images because I went back 3 times to check them when I was disassembling this thing the first time. They were not in there. I took 7 images. 3 of those were the wiring for the circuit protection board. So what I ended up having to do is look at the melt patterns on the insulation and look at the way the wires were facing and the conformal coat that was on the wires to figure out where they went on this board compared to where they came from. That was fun. I cut all of that footage out because it was literally just me staring at the thing for about an hour. Because I had images, and I have no idea. I had no idea where they went. None whatsoever. Not a clue. Could not tell you. It is slightly annoying, but I figured it out. We got it all back together. Put in a new... So, down by the cap is soldered in on the switch assembly near the bottom of the case. You see that red bit right there? That's a resistor. That's one of the replacement resistors that I ordered. It's a ballast resistor to prevent arcing between the AC and DC terminals on the inside. It does other things. Its purpose serves other purposes, but that's effectively what it's for. So I replaced it because when the cap blew, it blew stuff all over the resistor, and I didn't want to take the chance that it was corrosive and the resistor would fail in the future. I don't have a meter currently that can read the, what I believe was 30 megs. It was a large M on the side of the resistor, but this is also from the 60s, which means it could have been 30 milli, but I couldn't measure it, so either it's bad or it was a 30 meg resistor, and it's literally just used to keep sparkies down. So I have no way of measuring the thing, but I replaced it with the only thing I could find was a 25 meg, which should be sufficient. The biggest thing you're doing is preventing large voltage spikes, static electricity and the like, from arcing inside the case between those two leads, because that could be very bad. But if you're sticking 100,000 volts on either one of those leads, you're probably frying other things anyway. So it is what it is, I suppose. This bit right here was me doing some preliminary checks, sort of, quote-unquote off camera, as it were, to make sure that what I had done was successful, the circuit was functional, everything was working as intended. Once I determined that that was the case, we then moved the meter up onto the table and put the camera in position so that I could show it to you guys more clearly. And I just used my benchtop power supply there. It's actually my mom's benchtop power supply that she never uses because apparently when I explained it to her, I never explained quite how to use it fully. Video coming soon. So you can see there, when I plug it in, the needle moves, and it moves the expected amount for the voltage being measured. Thumbs up, job's a good one, and we get it all going back together. The next bit was, I didn't need it to be perfect. I don't need these things to be 100% perfect. They don't need to be scratch free and brand new and in perfect cases. They just need to work. With that being said, I did want to go and seal up some of the cracks in the phenolic casing that could potentially spread and later bits fall off of it, which would then introduce foreign materials to the inside and to the circuits, which could cause all kinds of other issues. So we wanted to kind of re-close up the case and make sure that dirt and debris and detritus couldn't get into the circuitry and cause issues in the future. So that's what the next step is, and that is just, I just took some super glue, I ran it, let it wick into the cracks, set there for, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes at a time until it was cured enough that I could run another little bead of super glue and just kind of build back up some material. There's other ways that you can do this with the phenolic. You can do thermosets, you can do epoxies, you can do super glue with a binder, like baking soda and some black colorant to imitate the coloring on the casing. All kinds of different things you can do. I have no need for any of that for, again, the purposes that I use these meters for. So I simply just wanted to make sure that the cracks would not spread any further. So we just super glued them up. There was a corner on the front case that was damaged and a chunk had fallen off. So I put the chunk back on and glued him in. And then we'll see here in a moment the back case and the cracks in it. There was a piece along the edge. It ended up falling off anyway because the piece was honestly too small. And every time I tried to hold it in place, the super glue would wick over across the piece onto my finger, and then the piece would stick to my finger instead. So I just ended up, a little chunk of it broke off the edge, and I just ended up leaving it. It's fine. You can see there's a little chunk there missing, and there is a fairly substantial crack along one edge because of its untimely demise at the hands of gravity. This guy right here. So, and you can see that chunk missing in the corner. But once the super glue cured, it's fine. I'm not even going to sand it down. It can be a little chunky on the outside. We really don't care all that much about it, other than it goes together and it keeps dirt, detritus, and debris out of the circuitry. So once we get it all back together, looks pretty decent. We've got a little bit missing, which I could fix later if I really wanted to. But for now, it's good. I put it back in the case. You don't even see it because it's behind the faceplate and surrounded by leather. But job's a good one. We get the thumbs up from past me. And we move on to whatever the next project might be. And as always, if you guys found any value, don't forget to like it, subscribe it, crank it, and rip it. And we'll see you in the next one.